My stepmom falsely accused me of abuse and my dad kicked me out at 15. 16 years later, he came back asking me to give my house to my sister. But I revealed the truth that destroyed the entire family. I'm 31 years old. I work in real estate development, and I've been having trouble sleeping for about a week now because everything that happened last month basically blew up in my face in the worst possible way. The thing is, I have a family, you know? An amazing wife, Olivia, a 3-year-old son named Wyatt, and a pretty good life. Considering that 16 years ago I was sleeping in an abandoned warehouse, not knowing where my next meal was coming from. But now everything I built feels like it's contaminated by this shit from the past that finally came to light. And I don't know if I did the right thing by telling the truth or if I should have just kept quiet forever. I guess I should start from the beginning. My mom died when I was 4. Cancer. I don't really remember much about her, honestly. Just flashes of her face and the smell of her perfume that sometimes still comes to mind for no reason. My dad, Donald, was devastated, but he also had to take care of me. You know what I mean? He was a tough guy, worked in construction, very old school, one of those guys who believe men don't cry and that problems are solved by working harder. We spent like 3 years alone, him and me, and we weren't exactly close, but we functioned, like a well-oiled machine where everyone knew their role. When I was 7, Dad met Sharon at, I don't know, I think at a bar or something. He never told me the whole story. She seemed nice at first, you know. She'd buy me things, ask me how school went, make Sunday dinners. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be all right. Maybe I'm going to have something close to a normal family again. They got married like 6 months after meeting. It was all very fast looking back. But I was a kid then, so what was I supposed to know about red flags or whatever? Things changed when my half-sister Heather was born. I was like 9 at the time, almost 10. And at first I was excited because I was going to be a big brother, you know? But it was, like, immediate. Literally from the moment they brought Heather home from the hospital, that Sharon completely changed with me. I was no longer the cute kid. I was like a nuisance, a bother taking up space and attention that should all go to Heather. And the worst part is my dad didn't see it, or didn't want to see it. Because to him, Sharon was perfect, and Heather was his little princess, and I just had to understand that I wasn't the center of the universe anymore. The next few years were basically a slow escalation of favoritism and subtle mistreatment. Sharon never hit me, or anything obvious. She was smarter than that. It was like, she'd forget to wash my clothes, but Heather's were always spotless. Or she'd make food that Heather liked, but if I asked for something specific, it was a problem. Or she'd buy Heather everything she wanted, but if I needed new shoes because mine had holes, it was a whole drama about money. And my dad, God, my dad just didn't see it or didn't care. Every time. I tried to tell him something. It was like I was being dramatic or jealous of my little sister. Okay, now we get to the important part. The moment that basically changed my whole life. I was 15. It was summer. I remember perfectly because I had just finished the school year and I was thinking that maybe that summer I could get a job or something to have my own money. I had gone to the park, like at 6 in the evening or something, because I needed to get out of the house where Sharon was once again treating me like garbage. And I saw her there, Sharon, kissing some guy at one of the picnic tables at the back of the park, where there are more trees and it's more hidden. The guy's name was Nathan. I knew him by sight because he worked at the gas station in town. I froze, literally couldn't move, and the worst part is, she saw me. Our eyes met, and I saw the panic in hers. But then it immediately changed to something colder, more calculating. I ran out of there, didn't know what to do. With that information, I was 15 and had just discovered my stepmother was cheating on my dad. I spent the rest of the day walking around town, trying to decide whether I should tell my dad or keep quiet. But wait, because it gets worse. Like 2 days later, I was in my room. It was late, like 11 at night, and I heard Sharon talking on the phone in the hallway. She had that low voice people use when they don't want to be heard, but you can still hear if you're close. And I heard her say, verbatim, Donald is never going to know that Heather isn't his. Nathan, I swear, nobody knows except you and me. I froze there in my bed, processing what I had just heard. My sister, well, my half-sister, Wasn't really my dad's daughter. She was Nathan's daughter, the guy from the gas station. I didn't sleep that night. Literally spent it staring at the ceiling, thinking about what to do. And I decided I wasn't going to say anything. Not yet, at least. Because I was afraid of what would happen. That nobody would believe me. That somehow it would all end up being my fault. But Sharon must have seen in my face that something was up. Or maybe she just decided to act before I could do something. Because like 3 days later, everything went to hell in the most horrible way possible. I came home from playing basketball with some friends, and there were 2 police officers at my house. My dad was there with a face I'd never seen on him, like beyond angry. It was just pure hatred. Sharon was crying on the couch with Heather, who was like 6 at the time, glued to her, and one of the cops told me they needed to ask me some questions about a serious accusation. Turns out Sharon had gone to the police station that morning and told them I had inappropriately touched Heather. That she had caught me several times going into Heather's room at night. That Heather had started acting weird, and when Sharon asked her, the girl supposedly told her what I had done to her. It was a lie. It was all completely a lie. I had never ever done anything to Heather, but there I was, 15 years old, being interrogated by cops, while my dad looked at me like I was the worst garbage in the world. I tried to explain, tried to say it wasn't true, that Sharon was lying, but when I said that, my dad exploded. He yelled at me, how dare I accuse Sharon of being a liar, that she had no reason to make up something like that he'd always known I was problematic, but never thought I was capable of something so sick. The cops took my computer, my phone, searched my room, everything. They asked me 1,000 questions, the same ones over and over in different ways, like trying to get me to contradict myself or admit something. But there was nothing to admit, because I hadn't done anything. After like 3 hours, the cops left saying they were going to investigate further. But for the moment, there wasn't enough evidence to arrest me. I thought that was a good thing, you know? Like, okay, they're going to investigate and they're going to see it's a lie and everything's going to be fine. But no, because as soon as the cops left, my dad told me, you have 10 minutes to put your stuff in a backpack and get out of my house. I tried to talk to him, to explain, but he just yelled, I don't want to hear you. I don't want your excuses. I don't want to ever see you again in my life. Sharon was there in the back, still crying. But I saw her face for a second when my dad wasn't looking, and she had like a half smile, like mission accomplished. You know what I mean? I threw whatever I could into a backpack. Clothes, a sweater, my toothbrush, I don't know, random things I grabbed in panic. I had like $200 I'd saved from birthdays and stuff. And my dad literally pushed me out of the house and closed the door. I just stood there on the porch, not knowing what to do, where to go, nothing. I was 15, nowhere to go, no relatives who could help me because my mom's family was all in another state and we barely had contact, and my dad's family, well, they'd always been closer to him than to me. I walked that night aimlessly, ended up at that park where I'd seen Sharon with Nathan, sat on a bench and cried like I'd never cried in my life. It wasn't just that I'd been kicked out of my house, it was that my own father had believed me, capable of something so horrible, without even giving me the benefit of the doubt. It was that Sharon had destroyed my life to protect her secret. It was that I knew the truth about Heather, but couldn't say anything, because who was going to believe me now, that I'd been accused of something so terrible? The next few months were, honestly, I don't even know how to describe them. I slept in the park the first few nights, but then I found an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town that had been left empty when the company closed. There was a place in the back where you could get in through a broken window, and inside it was relatively dry, and there was even an old broken couch that worked for sleeping. My $200 ran out in like 2 weeks, buying food at the supermarket. Cheap stuff like bread and peanut butter, cans of tuna. I met Stanley about a month into being on the street. He was an older guy, must have been like 50-something, who was also homeless, but had been like that for years and knew how to survive. He taught me where to get free food, like which restaurants threw out still good food in their dumpsters, which churches gave out breakfasts, how to ask for money without getting chased away. At first I had all this shame, you know? Like I wasn't really homeless. I was different. This was temporary. But after a while you realize you're not different. That everyone on the street has their own story of how they got there. and most of it isn't from being lazy or addicts like people think. Stanley had my back, taught me which places to avoid at night, which people were dangerous, how to stay clean, enough not to look so homeless that people would completely avoid you. I remember he told me once, the trick is to look good enough that people will give you money, but not so good they think you don't need it. It was sad, but it was true. I'd try to shower when I could in the public bathrooms at the library or the park. Wash my clothes at laundromats when I had enough money from panhandling. School obviously ended for me. Nobody in town wanted to help me after what Sharon had said. The accusation spread like wildfire, and even though technically I hadn't been formally charged because there was no evidence, the rumor was enough. People looked at me with disgust. Mothers held their kids tighter when I passed by, like I was a predator or something. Eventually, I decided I had to leave that town because I had no future there. I couldn't even get a normal job because everyone knew me. I was 16, almost 17, when Stanley told me his cousin Norman had a restaurant in the city, like 2 hours away, and that maybe he could get me something. It took us like a week to scrape together enough money for the bus, and Stanley came with me, said he was going to personally introduce me to Norman, so he'd give me a chance. The bus ride was weird, because I was excited to have an opportunity, but also terrified of starting over in a place where I didn't know anyone. Norman turned out to be a decent guy. He was like 40, ran a casual food restaurant, nothing fancy, but it was always packed. I told him an edited version of my story, like that I'd had family problems and needed a fresh start. He gave me a job washing dishes for $6 an hour, cash, no questions asked. He let me sleep in the restaurant's storage room the first few weeks until I could save up enough to rent a horrible room in a shared house with 5 other people. That's where I met Olivia. She was a waitress at the restaurant. She was in college studying business administration but worked nights and weekends to pay for her studies. She is beautiful. But what really caught my attention was that she treated me like a normal person, you know? Not like the homeless kid. Washing dishes. She'd ask me how I was doing, chat with me during breaks, bring me extra food when the cooks made too much. One day, I must have been working there for 6 months. Olivia saw me reading a book during my break. It was something I'd found in a donation box outside a library. She asked if I'd finished school, and I told her no, that I'd had to drop out in 10th grade, and she told me, "You should get your G, I can help you study if you want." That's how it all started. She'd lend me her college books, explain math and science stuff I didn't understand. It took me a year, but I finally passed the GED exam when I was 18. Olivia was more excited than me. She hugged me when I told her, and it was like the first affectionate physical contact I'd had in years, and it almost made me cry right there in the restaurant. We started dating formally shortly after that, though I felt like a fraud because she didn't know my whole story, didn't know about the accusation, didn't know I'd been truly homeless. I didn't know anything about Sharon and Heather and the truth I was carrying. Olivia's dad, who worked in real estate development, offered me a job as an assistant in his office when Olivia told him I'd gotten my GED and was a hard worker. I started basically doing the work nobody else wanted to do, filing papers, making copies, answering phones. But I learned fast, really fast. And Olivia's dad noticed. He started giving me more responsibilities, sent me to take courses on real estate, helped me get my license when I turned 21. Olivia and I got married when I was 23, and she was 24. She'd already graduated and was working too. It was a small wedding, just her friends and family because obviously I didn't invite anyone from my past. Her family accepted me completely, which was weird for me because I wasn't used to people just loving me without conditions. Wyatt was born when I was 28, and God, when I held him for the first time in the hospital, I swore I was going to be a better father than the one I had. By the time I turned 30, I was already working directly with Olivia's dad as a junior partner in the company. We were developing apartment complexes and commercial properties. I was making good money. We had a nice house in a nice suburb. It was like living someone else's life, you know? Like the 15-year-old Nicholas, sleeping in an abandoned warehouse couldn't be the same person as the 30-year-old Nicholas with a family and a successful career. During all those years, 16 years, I didn't hear anything from my family. Nothing from my dad, nothing from Sharon, nothing from Heather. I honestly tried not to think about them, though obviously I thought about them. more than I wanted to admit. I wondered if Heather had grown up well, if she'd ever wondered about me, if Sharon had told her some version of why her older brother disappeared. I wondered if my dad ever doubted Sharon's story, if he ever regretted throwing me out. And then, like 2 months ago, I got a message on Facebook from my dad. I literally almost had a heart attack when I saw his name. The message said something like, "Nicholas, I know it's been many years and I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'd like to reconnect with you if you're willing. Your sister Heather is getting married soon, and she'd like to meet you." He attached a photo of Heather, who was now 24 and looked a lot like Sharon. I didn't answer immediately because I didn't know what to say, what to feel. I showed the message to Olivia, who knew I'd been estranged from my family, but didn't know the whole horrible story of why. I told her everything that night. Everything about Sharon, about the false accusation, about being kicked out at 15, about the truth about Heather. Olivia was in shock. Couldn't believe I'd been carrying all that for so many years, without telling her. She asked me if I wanted to reconnect with them, and honestly, I didn't know. After like a week, I answered my dad saying I was willing to talk. We spoke on the phone. It was super awkward. He sounded old, tired. He told me Heather was getting married to her college boyfriend, that they were planning the wedding, that she'd always wondered about her older brother. He told me he and Sharon were still together, but things weren't perfect, that he'd had some health problems. He didn't mention anything about the accusation, nothing about throwing me out, like as if that never happened. We agreed they'd come visit me, like to meet Olivia and Wyatt and see my house. They came last month. My dad Donald was 58 now, and looked older than he should, kind of worn out by life. Sharon looked practically the same, maybe with more wrinkles, but with that same energy of always calculating everything. And Heather, well, Heather seemed genuinely nice, nervous to meet me, but excited too. Lunch was fine, a bit forced, but okay. Heather told me about her fiancé, about her wedding plans, about her job as an elementary school teacher. My dad played a bit with Wyatt, which was weird to see. Sharon barely spoke, just looked at me in a way I couldn't decipher, like between curious and cautious. After lunch, when Olivia took Wyatt to his room for a nap and Heather was looking at family photos in the living room, my dad pulled me aside and said he needed to talk to me privately. We went out to the patio, and that's when everything went sideways. My dad told me, "Look, Nicholas, you've done very well for yourself. This house is beautiful. Your family is beautiful. Clearly, you've been very successful." And I thought he was going to apologize, like that he was finally going to admit he was wrong, that he should have listened to me. But no, instead he told me, "Heather is starting her life, and Sharon and I aren't in a position to help her as much as we'd like. You have this big house, you have money. We thought maybe you could give this house to Heather as a wedding gift." I froze, literally thought I'd heard wrong. I said, "Are you kidding?" And he said, "No, I'm being serious. You can buy another house, you're successful in real estate, but Heather needs a place to start her marriage. And I thought as her big brother, you'd want to help her." And something in me just broke, you know? I told him, "You want me to give my house to Heather? The house I bought with my own money after you threw me out on the street when I was 15? After you believed me capable of something horrible without even asking for my side?" And he got all defensive, saying that was a long time ago, that I needed to let go of the past, that now we had a chance to be a family again. And that's when I said it, the words I'd been holding for 16 years. I told him, "Do you want to know why Sharon falsely accused me? Do you want to know the real reason she destroyed my life?" And I told him everything. About seeing her kissing Nathan at the park. About hearing her on the phone admitting Heather wasn't my dad's daughter. About how she accused me before I could tell her secret. My dad went white, like all the color drained from his face. He went into the house in a fury, grabbed Sharon by the arm, and demanded she tell him the truth. Sharon tried to deny everything, saying I was lying, that I was making up crazy things to get revenge after so many years. But my dad kept pressing, and Heather was there now too, asking what was going on, and Olivia was in shock watching everything unfold. Finally, Sharon broke down and admitted everything through tears. Admitted the affair with Nathan. Admitted Heather wasn't my dad's daughter. Admitted she'd falsely accused me because she was afraid I'd tell the truth. Heather became hysterical, screaming that it couldn't be true. How was it possible her whole life was a lie? My dad was like in a trance, like processing information that was blowing his mind. They left my house in complete chaos. Heather crying uncontrollably, Sharon trying to explain herself, my dad in absolute silence, but with an expression that was scary. Olivia hugged me after they left and told me she was sorry, that she didn't know it was going to explode like that maybe we should have handled everything differently. But honestly, I don't know how it could have been handled differently. The truth was going to come out eventually. What happened after was even worse than that day. A week later, my dad had a paternity test done on Heather. The results confirmed what we already knew: she wasn't his biological daughter. My dad confronted Sharon again, and this time he got violent, pushed her against a wall, and she fell badly, 3 fractured vertebrae, ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks. He was arrested for aggravated assault, eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison, though he'll probably get out in 18 months with good behavior. Sharon entered rehab, not for the assault, but because it turned out she had an addiction to pain medication that had started before the incident. Heather called off her wedding. Her fiancé broke up with her because all the family drama was too much for him. She tried to contact Nathan to meet her biological father and discovered he died from an overdose 2 years ago. Heather sent me a message like 3 weeks ago, asking if we could talk. I told her I wasn't ready, that I needed time. She responded that she understood but needed me to know. She never knew anything about the false accusation, that Sharon had never told her what really happened to me. She told me she felt horrible about everything, that her whole life was a lie and she didn't know who she really was. Part of me feels compassion for her, you know? Because she's a victim in all this too. She never asked to be in the middle of Sharon's lies. But another part of me is too exhausted, too traumatized by everything, to be able to be the understanding big brother she maybe needs. She told me she's planning to move out of state, start over somewhere nobody knows this whole horrible story. My dad wrote me from prison last week, a handwritten letter where he finally apologized. He said there wasn't a day he didn't regret throwing me out, not listening to me, destroying the relationship with his only real son by believing Sharon's lies. He said he'd understand if I never forgave him, that he didn't deserve my forgiveness. I still haven't answered him, because honestly I don't know what to say. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I want him in my life after he gets out of prison. Olivia has been amazing through all this. She's supported me completely, gone with me to therapy. Because yeah, I finally started therapy to process this whole mess. The therapist says it's normal to feel this mix of rage and sadness and relief and guilt all at the same time. He says that telling the truth wasn't wrong, that I had a right to my truth after so many years. But I still feel responsible somehow. You know what I mean? Like by telling the truth, I destroyed what little was left of that family, even though that family was already built on lies from the beginning. Wyatt asked me the other night why I was sad. I told him that sometimes adults have complicated problems that are hard to explain. But what was important was that he knew I loved him and would always be there for him. He gave me a hug and said, "It's okay, Daddy. I love you too." And that, honestly, that's what keeps me sane, in the middle of all this chaos, knowing I have a real family now, a family I built myself, a family that's not based on lies and manipulation. I don't know what's going to happen with Heather, with my dad, with Sharon. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive, or if I even want to try. What I do know is the truth finally came out after 16 years. And even though the consequences have been catastrophic, at least I'm not carrying that horrible secret alone anymore. At least Heather now knows the truth about her origins, however painful it is. At least my dad knows he threw out his only real son based on lies. And me, well, I can finally start to truly heal, I guess, without that crushing weight of injustice I carried for so many years.